My marriage is in 2 weeks, but it's all going downhill. Marty asked for my help in finding out who the other guy was that Evelyn was cheating on him with. The first thing I did was not some major amount of sleuthing. It was basically just going through LinkedIn trying to find the guy through Evelyn's connections, but that brought up nothing, which I thought was strange. Marty had told me that Evelyn was supposed to go out for drinks tonight after work and that she said she wouldn't be home until around 9 or 10. He didn't have to tell me what he suspected since I pretty much understood right away. I told him that I would help him, but he needed to come with me. I then contacted my buddy Mark, explained the situation to him and had him agree to meet us later in the day. The first thing we did was drive over to Marty's parents' house so that they could watch their granddaughter. I don't know what Marty told them as I waited in the car. After that, we went to Evelyn's place of work. It's one of those large commercial strip mall type centers with all of these nondescript offices in a row and a large, non-gated car park. We drove around until we found Evelyn's car and then I had Marty unlock it with the second set of keys. I then gave Marty a voice-activated recorder and a GPS tracker to place in the car. Once done with that, we left, parked a bit down the street and waited for my friend to arrive and for Evelyn to leave the business. My friend Mark shows up about 20 minutes later, hops in the car with us, and around an hour after that Evelyn comes out of her office with 2 of her girlfriends and a tall, younger-looking man with sandy blonde hair. They are obviously holding hands and I'm like, damn Evelyn, you're making it easy for me. I take a couple of pictures from the car and then wait for Evelyn to leave in hers and I start tracking her. At first I thought she might go right to a hotel or something, but she didn't. Instead she drove to a reasonably nice bar and grill in a nice section of town and parked on the street. I drove by her as she was getting out of her car and entering the establishment and then found my own parking spot and went over the plan. First we sent Mark in, since no one knew him. He had basically 2 jobs. First, try to get any compromising pictures he could of Evelyn and Jake, and second to be my alibi. Marty and I waited in the car for around 20 minutes until I got the first in the series of text messages from Mark. They were pictures of Evelyn and Jake making out in front of their 2 female co-workers. Marty's suspicions were right, they were helping Evelyn hide the affair from him. He was obviously very upset and angry. Evidently one of the co-workers is married and as a couple they are good friends with Marty and Evelyn, both of them having toddlers around the same age. I asked Marty if that's enough for him, but he says he still really wants to know who this guy is. I try to tell him that we can find out later, but he's practically begging me at this point, so I tell him to wait, text Mark that I'm coming in and then enter the bar myself. First thing I see is Evelyn and her crew laughing and drinking at one of those tall round tables near the front window as I enter. I stop for a moment, pretend to be surprised and then call out to Evelyn. Evelyn. Hi. What are you doing here? She's obviously shocked to see me and everyone around her tenses up immediately. Evelyn quickly introduces me as her sister's fiancé and says that we are getting married in 2 weeks. There are a lot of congratulations from everyone. I thank them and then stick out my hand to the blonde guy and introduce myself with my full name, hoping that he'll respond in kind, and he does. I introduce myself to everyone else and then tell Evelyn that I'm here to meet a co-worker. I wave to Mark, and then excuse myself. Once I get over to Mark, I tell him the guy's name and we both whip out our phones and go to work. It doesn't take long for us to find him. He's got social media profiles and a couple of court case judgments against him. Turns out that Jake, the guy Evelyn is cheating with, is 26, married and has a 1-year-old daughter. This just keeps getting better. I text Marty the guy's name and I decide I want to push my luck and tell him to wait a few more minutes. Basically, I'm playing babysitter here at the bar. I'm totally visible to Evelyn and her crew. I can see out of the corner of my eye that no one is particularly happy about this and my presence is really ruining the night. This is good. I let this go on for about 10 minutes and then tell Marty to text Evelyn that he's spending the night at his parents' house with their daughter. It doesn't take long after that until I catch Evelyn taking out her phone, showing it to Jake and then everyone deciding to pack up. Evelyn comes over to me, says good night and asks me if Sarah and I want to come over for dinner this weekend. I smile and say that sounds like a great idea and wish her and her co-workers a good night. Mark and I wait for them to leave, then pay our bill and hurry back to the waiting Marty. There's a bit of hesitation here, because we don't know exactly what Evelyn was going to do. Like I half assumed she might have already booked a hotel room and was heading there, which would have made everything a lot more complicated and limited what I could do, but it turns out that tonight was probably meant to be just drinks at the bar and it wasn't until Marty decided to spend the night at his parents that it turned into something more. Evelyn made a beeline for home and we followed behind her way out of sight and parked down the street. It didn't take long after that until another car pulled into Marty's driveway and we saw Jake get out, go up to the door, knock and be greeted by Evelyn. They went inside together. Now, at this point it's about 7:30 and I have my own stuff to do tonight and I think, that is a friend. I've done pretty much all I can do for Marty and he can handle the rest himself. Edit. I came home to talk to Sarah about canceling the wedding and found her comforting Evelyn on the couch. I almost turned around and walked out but didn't. I laughed at Evelyn there and then. She turned around and asked me what was so funny. Then I exposed it all. How I found out about her affair. How I helped her husband figure it all out, and how mine and Sarah's wedding was off. Ty turned into a heated argument and they ganged up on me. Not in that way sadly. They both started trying to be physical with MADNTHRW things at me. Evelyn then pulled a knife on me while Sarah was just yelling. Thankfully I managed to avoid Evelyn and managed to push her into the counter, causing her to fall and injure her wrist. Sarah and her went ballistic and called the police. Police came and took our statements, arrested both Sarah and Evelyn. I slumped down after and had a drink. And I didn't even get my 3-way. SMH. Can't forgive my wife and it's killing me. I met my wife through an ex-girlfriend. We talked over the phone from different states for 6 weeks before I flew out to see her. During those phone calls, we talked about life, our childhood, our parents, being a parent, and everything else that you normally discuss when trying to get to know someone. Both of us had SHY childhoods. So when we had to talk about what happens if we don't work out, We agreed using the children as leverage was not on the table as both of our parents did the same, and we wanted to break the cycle. We both agreed that we should both have access to the kids regardless of what happens. As stated previously, I flew out to see her after 6 weeks of talking on the phone, and I never went home. We were married a week later. I broke my back, and the surgery caused some issues with reproduction. I was supposed to be infertile, but our son was conceived the first time we were intimate after I healed. This is where the problems begin. Postpartum kicked in full swing about a year after our son was born. He needs a brother or sister. He'll be lonely if he's the only child. I heard every version of this repeatedly for another year. It's not horrible to talk about having another child, but we had already discussed not having any kids before I broke my back and when the DR made us discuss it again before the surgery. Now we have our beautiful, miracle baby boy, and I was content. She wasn't. There wasn't a day that went by. She didn't try to convince me we needed another child. I guess she was right, but it's the way she went about it. Fast forward another year. We're still not in a good place with this second child talk, but that changes, and suddenly, one day the conversations just stopped. She's smiling. Acting normal again. I'm terrified because I have no clue what's going on with this woman. A week later, she tells me she's going to the DR for a checkup. The day normally finishes with no arguments or discussions about another child. This continues for some time. We start sleeping in the same bed. Intimacy returns eventually. I feel like things are returning to the status quo, and we don't have another incident until Father's Day 2015. It's gift time, and I'm sitting at the table with my boy and my wife. She hands me a bag, and I open it to find the intended gift, plus a t-shirt that's about 20 sizes too small that says best brother ever. Confusion sets in immediately. I don't know what's happening. I finally get it. The shirt is for my son. I start crying. The company we had left as soon as the waterworks got going. I remember how betrayed I felt. She was crying happy tears, and I was confused because she was supposed to have an IUD that prevents this from happening. She says, "I told you I was having that taken out." I reply, no, you said you were going for your girly checkup." This conversation goes nowhere, and I'm furious. Our relationship, in my mind, is over. This was calculated manipulation and disregard for me or anything I wanted. Over the next month, I wind up in the ER 8 different times due to panic attacks. I thought I was having a heart attack, but no, it was just the stress of everything crushing me. Moving forward another year, my daughter is with us, healthy and beautiful, and I get offered a promotion that moves us to another state. A chance for my wife to be a stay-at-home mom with a raise and cheaper cost of living in a new state. We accept. Ha ha ha. I don't really care about that, though. I'm checked out and have been since the pregnancy news. We're fighting now, and that's not normal. We never fought. She tells me, "F you," one night, and I respond with, "I want a divorce." I take off that night and go find the lady that works the front office. We end up together later. I file for legal separation. I flaunt the new girl around for everyone to see. Except for my kids. My kids were never introduced to her. Sarah takes off back to our home state and doesn't return. I'm the only one working, and she keeps telling me I should take time off to go see them. I can't. She stays in our home state for a few months, spending almost everything in our account and refusing to bring the kids home. This isn't what we discussed, and I'm furious. I miss my kids terribly, but I can't take off work just because she doesn't want to come home. I call her again to ask if she'll bring them, and she says no, so I ask, "Do you have to be in a casket before I can see my kids again?" Oops. We make plans for me to drive out Christmas to see them. I do so and am greeted with a restraining order. On Christmas Eve, I have a car full of gifts I can't give to my kids. I can't even hug them. Or see them. I spent the next couple of years only able to see my kids 2 hours a day, 2 days a week, every other week. So 4 hours in 2 weeks, supervised. Like I'm a molester. A monster. Before you all berated me for my comment, which I admit was stupid, you should know I've never hit a woman in my life. I own multiple firearms, which I keep in a safe, and I have never had an incident. I do not break the law. I am not what you would consider high risk for anything. I'm also not unstable in any way. I'm emotional, not crazy. I do know it was wrong to say what I said, but I wasn't threatening her life. I do see that she could take it that way, but I don't buy that she was scared for her life when I was 3 states away and didn't say anything like, "I'm going to put you in a casket so I can see my kids again." After being separated for a few years, we ended up back together. I just can't figure out if I'm here for her or the kids. Or both? I don't trust her, and all of this messes with me so much that I've been in therapy for the past 2 years just so I can deal with my day-to-day. I break down crying every day for what seems like no reason at all. I'm not happy. I have no interest in the things I used to love doing. I feel like I'm unaliving myself with the stress, and I've seen my doctor more recently than I ever have. On top of all of this, I worry daily that the separation also affected my children and that I'm just perpetuating that cycle of neglect and abuse that I want so desperately to break. Divorce is not an option. As much as I worry that I've already screwed up my kids from the separation, divorce would be the straw that broke the camel's back. I can't. However, I also don't know how to make this work. Or if it can work. Or should it even work? This puts me right back to divorce isn't an option, but I'm unaliving myself like this. I think I've resigned to the fact that I'm just going to die miserable, but my kids will be happy and unaware, so that's all that matters. I'm sure the kids will figure it out as they get older. We don't really act like a loving couple. Am I being difficult/stubborn/stupid by not forgiving my wife? I just can't find it in me to forgive her. In the end, I know that I did plenty wrong. I know that I definitely played my part in all of this. I hope this doesn't come across like I'm perfect and she's trash. We're both trash, but maybe we don't belong to the same dumpster. I just don't know anymore. What the most heartbreaking experience you ever had? I had to take my BFF to the same hospital that my little brother died in only 15 hours earlier. A couple months ago, my little brother John passed away tragically at only 15. He was hit by a car while riding his bike to school. John was a high-functioning autistic and had missed the bus that day, so he decided to ride his bike, which was normal. My parents' driveway had a steep decline that led into the road. The house was about 2 miles from school, so he could have made it on time if he hurried. He rode down the driveway and lost control of the brakes. He then went onto the road, where he was immediately struck by a car going 55 miles per hour. He flew 30 feet into a nearby ditch. He was brain dead on impact and was soon rushed to the hospital. At the time, I was then attending college about 1 hour away and was on my way to class. My father called me and told me the terrible news. I was inconsolable and drove to the hospital as quickly as I could. When I arrived, they had already pronounced my brother dead. It was the worst day of my life. I called Amy, who went to a different college about 2 hours away. She told me she was coming and pulled to my parents' house several hours later. My whole family was troubled, and we couldn't believe this happened outside our house. We all grabbed a beer and tried to calm down. I was so happy that Amy drove down to be with me in my time of need. She was the best, or so I thought. Amy and I had been best friends since middle school. My parents used to say that she was my forever friend. Amy was pretty much part of my family. But that particular day, she seemed kind of off. She decided running to the liquor store and purchasing more booze was a good idea. I was not in the mood to drink and only had one beer. When she returned, she and my grandfather, a bad alcoholic, kept drinking and drinking. As time went on, Amy got so drunk that she ended up puking everywhere. My sister and I carried her to the guest bedroom, and I stayed in bed with her so I could keep an eye on her. Then she started saying things that made no sense and then started convulsing. I was terrified. It got so bad to the point where I had to drive her to the hospital. The same hospital where my brother just died. When I brought her into the hospital and checked her in, the nurse asked if I was related to her. I said no, and they told me I would have to wait outside. They assured me that she would be fine, but I was not allowed in. There, I sat in the same exact chair in the same waiting room twice in one day. I was shaking with so many emotions. I could not find her phone and didn't have her parents' number, so I drove to their house and told her parents where she was and what was going on. Then I just left and went home to be with my family. The next day, I awoke with text messages from her sister's phone. Amy was yelling at me and asked why I just left her in the hospital and went and told her parents that she was drunk. She asked me why I just couldn't stay with her if I cared about her so much. She said I was an awful friend, and she didn't even remember what happened. I snapped and told her off. I told her to come pick up her car and leave me alone and to don't bother coming to the funeral since it was apparent that she wasn't even really there for me. I had to end up taking care of her in the toughest moment in my life. She came and picked up her car, and I didn't hear from her again. After the funeral, I came to find out from her sister that she was on Molly and other stuff before she got to my house. So when the alcohol mixed with it, it caused a problem.